Okay, so hey guys and welcome back to another Axel 72 video, and in today's video I'm going to be giving my prediction for the Erickson Lubin versus Ardreal Holmes Jr. fight. And so if you are new around here and you have not yet subscribed, please do so, like the video if you do indeed like the video, and let's get straight into it. So this is a Pro Box TV main event, and this is a really good main event for them, to be completely honest. There's no discredit to what they are doing as an organization, but I don't think they've put on a crazy high level of caliber of events, especially so far this year. Last year there was some decent events. I mean, they had a Lamont Roach fights against McCrory, which was a good world title fight. Nothing too crazy, but a good world title fight. And they've done a few other Irish cards as well, which were good. Solid cards with good names on as well, but they haven't really lit up the boxing world or really done anything of too much note, in my opinion, so far this year. But this is a very good contest, in my opinion. This is Erickson Lubin, who has been a very good fighter in his time and has been without a contest for a long time. And he hasn't fought for a while, that's a fact. He hasn't fought since latish 2023, so it has been a while since we've seen him. And of course he is a big name. I mean, obviously he's not a world champion or a former world champion, but he is a guy who has fought at a very high level and has had some decently good level victories as well. And even though he's only 29 years of age, he has had fights in which he has had quite a few big name fights. And so for Pro Box to be able to get him on a card, in a world title eliminator for his return fight, you got to give him that credit for them to be able to showcase that they can, have that draw and have that pull for fighters to come and fight for them. And also at the same time, you got to give Lubin credit for, yes, like I say, he has been without a fight for a while, and yes, that probably has come to frustrations of certain fighters. I mean, Tim Tszyu, from what I remember, was very close to having a fight with Lubin, and that was seemingly all set in stone. And then, that just kind of faded away and never really happened. And I remember hearing that Tim Tszyu was quite frustrated that that didn't happen, and perhaps that was one of the reasons as to why Lubin hasn't fought in a while. But also at the same time, he is in a position in his career where realistically he can decide to do whatever he wants. I mean, in my opinion, I would love to see a rematch with him and Ramos, because Ramos obviously lost against Lubin, and I believe it was a unanimous decision defeat, but it definitely was a very well contested fight. And you see the way that Ramos's career has progressed. Obviously he had that one loss on the record versus Lubin, but since then he's been on a great run, and to be fair, isn't too far away from, you could arguably put him into a world title now, and he's deserving of it. And so he obviously lost to Lubin, and that was his last fight. And then perhaps maybe he wanted to have some time out. Maybe, he had some injuries he was dealing with. You never really know why fighters at this point in their career have so long out, because obviously, like I say, he's not that old, 29 years of age, and having the amount of fights he's had, he has been, in the lead up to his bit of a hiatus, he has been a very active fighter. And so, yeah, like I say, it's been intriguing to see the fact that we haven't seen him for a while, and he can be a really exciting world level type of fighter when he's on his day and at his best. And he has proven that with some good wins against, he beat Ramos. Obviously, it was in a relatively maybe controversial way, but he beat him. He beat Rosario as well, former, I believe he was a world champion. That was a good win. Ramos, of course, just recently beat him as well. He beat Gorsha, which was a good win. And so he definitely has gotten some good wins in his career. But it's just any time in which he has taken that more so of a significant step up, he has maybe shown slight weaknesses. I mean, when he fought Fundora, he fought very well and got a knockdown against Fundora and did very well to, survive the length that he did. And he wanted to keep fighting even though his face was completely busted up. But, you got to give him credit for that, and what we've seen Fundora go on to achieve since then. Like I say, it's kind of made Lubin's defeat not really a bad defeat because, like I say, Fundora has been a world beater since then. And he's, yes, lost via stoppage versus Mendoza, but has been able to reclaim his titles, now defend his title in his titles in very significant fashion, and he is looking like a great fighter again. So, the fact that Lubin lost to him is no real discredit. Of course, the one time in which he had a true world title opportunity was when he fought Jamel Charlo. Charlo, of course, from what we see of him recently, he just lost to Canelo, and things weren't at things looked bad in that fight. It was definitely him coming up too much in weight divisions. But before that, especially when he fought Lubin, he was at his best, and he was on a very good run. And I think he just had the Trout fight, or was that just before the Trout fight? Yeah. And then after the Trout fight, he lost to Tony Harrison. But it was before that when he fought Lubin, and he scored a great knockout against Lubin, where of course that is going to affect any fighter mentally, and he got a lot of stick for that. And you know people were saying that he wouldn't be able to get back to a world level as a result of it. So that you have to give him some credit for what he has achieved in his career. And yes, he's never been able to become a world champion, but he has fought at an incredibly high level, saying he hasn't, and consistently at a high level as well. And this is another world title final eliminator. Of course, the IBF world title is meant to be an eliminator for of course in the super welterweight division. Will this then lead on to him go on to fight for the IBF belt? Possibly, maybe if he wins this fight, it could do because Murtazaliev, of course, is the IBF champion. There probably won't be a rematch versus Zoo. There's no real talks about that. Zoo is in talks to fight Fundora, and he was, suspected to fight Thurman, but now Murtazaliev is calling out Thurman, but Thurman hasn't really given seemingly any sort of response to Murtazaliev, so maybe he doesn't want that fight, Thurman, because he knows that Murtazaliev isn't a big name and he only really wants to fight names that are relatively big at this point in his career, even though a world title would be on the line. So maybe the winner of this fight could go on to fight something like a Murtazaliev. But for Ardreal Holmes Jr., he's not really fought at that high of a level, and realistically, he wants to seemingly, put himself out there as a boxer puncher, but you kind of got to look at his record and look at it and say that you can't really say that, any real times he's taken I say major step ups, he hasn't really had that major step ups. He's not been able to stop his opponents, and he's not looked bad. He's had a few solid wins, and he is a good technical fighter who can fight on the back foot, and he's got them long limbs which he can utilize well. He's got a good solid jab, and he does throw his counters crisply, and he's able to fight on the back foot well. But you can't really say he's got too much of a snap, or the same kind of level of power in which we've seen from Lubin in the past. Lubin has been able to score some big knockouts against world kind of level names, and he's been able to do that impressively. Like I said, the Rosario one was a great one because Rosario was still in a better position in his career than when he fought Ramos, and he managed to knock him out, Lubin. So that was a great win for him, and that really showcased that no matter kind of where Lubin is in his career, he can still knock out a guy if they're not ready for the world level. And so this is going to be a real test for Lubin, for Holmes Jr. I mean, to see if he is a world level contender. And so we will of course have to wait and see. For this fight, as a prediction, I am going to say that Ardreal Holmes Jr. is going to be able to win via unanimous decision. Yes, perhaps that might be an upset, but I think the timeout for Lubin isn't going to benefit his career. It's the first time seemingly in his career that he's had this long of a timeout. It's not a crazy amount of time, but a year and a half in boxing can, definitely add up. And Ardreal Holmes is going to be coming into this, of course, very eager to prove. I think he has got the faster hands. I think Lubin didn't showcase a great performance against Ramos. Yes, he managed to hold in there and, had his own stints of better work, and perhaps he might be able to throw combinations better. But Holmes Jr., I think, might struggle against certain opposition in this, weight division, could definitely struggle against the Murtazaliev. But I think a fight like this, it could play into his hands because I think he's much faster than a Lubin, and I think the Lubin's probably only realistically going to get slower in his career because his last performance, he didn't really look like that fast of a fighter. I think the only real reason in which he was having success was because Ramos was just stood right in front of him. I love Ramos's style, but it's perhaps not always the most defensively smart. So you know, Holmes is the complete opposite to that realistically. Yes, he might be on the back foot more so, but I think he'll set the traps, he'll lead Lubin onto shots. I think he'll catch him nicely with the jab coming in because I don't think Lubin, is that defensively aware. I don't think he's going to be moving his head off the line that much, and perhaps Lubin could make it into a physical contest in which Holmes Jr. hasn't really had to deal with too much so far in his career. But for the most part, like I say, I think Holmes Jr. won't be able to stop him, but I think we'll be able to go on to a unanimous decision victory in which perhaps we could see a Lubin that could get frustrated into the later rounds. Then who he could go on to fight next, that is of course a huge step up victory, a huge victory for Holmes Jr.'s career. So he of course, like I say, could go on to fight Murtazaliev next. Like I say, I'm not entirely sure what's happening with him, so we'll have to wait and see. Somebody like a Ramos, of course, could be a great fight as well if Ramos isn't in line to fight for a world championship, which to be fair doesn't seem like that's going to happen next because, I mean, we've got Zayas seemingly fighting for the vacant world titles that Vandora's just vacated. Vandora still has his own world title. Metazaliev has his own world title, so maybe it could be difficult for Ramos to get into a world title position. So maybe an Ardreal Holmes could go in and slide up and take another test there, or something like a Bahachuk as well. Bahachuk is definitely deserving of a world title opportunity and is looking great whenever he's had to fight as of recent, and so if he again, he's another guy in which not all of these contenders are going to be able to get a world title opportunity, of course. So why not, of course, put them up against each other? And I think Holmes Jr. would only benefit from fighting more different styles because, like I say, he's still quite inexperienced. So even if he beats Lubin, I wouldn't mind seeing him have another contenders matchup, even two more contenders matchups before he goes into a world title fight because it will, only benefit him in the long term, in my opinion. To speak about another fight on this card though, and it's a fight in which hasn't really been even promoted realistically at all. It is, of course, for the women's WBA World Super Bantamweights title. It's Nazarena Romero versus Mayelli Flores, and it's a definitely an underrated matchup. And I think Nazarena Romero is somebody who has been improving with her matchups, and her last performance was a much better performance than what we have seen from her. Previously, we've definitely seen a fighter in which has been drawn into her opponent's fights. I mean, we saw that especially against Erica Cruz, we saw that, and it's difficult to not get drawn into a Erica Cruz fight because even Amanda Serrano realistically at points just got drawn into an absolute firefight, and that's what's going to benefit Cruz. But now that Romero is being trained by Manny Robles, I think, like I say, she was improving with every matchup and every fight, and I think her last performance was good and was showing something a bit different. Yes, maybe she's not the most defensively sound, but she's going to let her hands go. She's going to be able to throw nice straight shot combinations. She's going to be aggressive. She's going to really try and give her all into her punches. I'm surprised she doesn't get more stoppages, to be completely honest, because it does look like she's throwing with intent. But like I say, she was improving then. Now that she's got Manny Robles with her, this fight could be a much better again performance from Romero because of course Robles is a great coach, and it's going to be really intriguing to see what he is able to do with Romero because just some names in which Manny Robles has even been able to work with. Bahachuk is one of them, great name. Oscar Valdez, world champion, great name. Andy Ruiz, another great name. Just some real world class level fighters in which he's been able to work with and have success with. And so, now it will be, of course, very intriguing to see what he can do with a very raw but a very talented fighter in Romero. Flores, though, of course, she's a very game fighter as well. This is her second opportunity at fighting for a world title. She had her first chance, not go her way. She started off strong, but then she got knocked down, and then then she scored a knockdown, but then from there on, she kind of then struggled for the rest of the fight and let her opponent come into it and gain confidence, and it was Luna she was fighting up against, and yeah, from then on out, it wasn't really the best of runs, but she's aggressive as well. She could easily draw Romero into a firefight. She's going to be giving her all. She's really going to probably suit, like I said, the aggressive style of Romero and want to fight in that way, but she's definitely the more flat-footed fighter. She fights like she's a bit older of a fighter than she actually is. She actually isn't that old. She's only 30, but she, like I say, is limited defensively as well. I think Romero has all the makings to be able to win this fight, but I'm going to say it's going to be a close fight. I'm going to say it's going to be a split decision victory. Yes, that may be a controversial thing to say, but for the most part, I think it will be a close fight. I think, there is only a certain amount you can do with a certain fighter in a short space of time. So maybe we will see a good Romero for the first handful of rounds. But, if Flores starts well and finishes well, she is able to keep her, momentum up and her tempo up for the most part, Flores. So she could definitely make it into a firefight and an aggressive one at that with the power that Flores has. So it definitely could lead into a close decision for Romero. Of course, she has the 2 draws on her record, so it shows that often she isn't able to make fights significantly go into her favour at a world level. So why not a fight like this kind of going out that way would not surprise me at all. So yeah, I think Romero's going to be able to win, but I think it's going to be a close decision. Then who she goes on to fight next? Possibly a Flores again. Maybe, we'll see. We'll have to see how entertaining it is. Or, Cruz again. That could be a great fight to make. It wouldn't surprise me if we see any rematch realistically from them world level contests in which Romero has had. Or, Scotney is fighting Mercado for the rest of the belts on the Taylor Serrano undercard. I love what Most Valuable Promotions are doing with getting all the world champions in which just haven't been fighting each other in the women's side of things. Actually, finally, like I say, to have these matchups to see who is the best on this major women's celebratory card. So, the winner of that perhaps could go on to then try and become undisputed by fighting Romero. Why not? But yeah, that is it for today's video. Hope you did enjoy. Like the video if you didn't. Like the video, subscribe if you're new, and thanks for watching.